Serious, teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing your student has ever done? I had a 5th grade student pick up 2 brick-sized rocks and try and stone another kid to death. Kids in my mom's class tried to poison another little girl they were having a feud with. They tampered with her snack and put things like sharp staples and hand sanitizer in it. They also put pencil lead in thinking it would harm her. Obviously ultimately harmless, but the intent was there. I'm glad one of the little boys involved came up to my mum and let her know what the plan was out of guilt. They're in 4th grade, old enough to know better, and to know what eating harmful things can do to a person. My first girlfriend works at a children's home with mental illness. There is a 8-year-old boy there for molesting his 5-year-old sister, and there is a warning on his door to his room that it is to never be closed for any reason, as he has been known to try and actually touch the other kids and staff. Recently had one of my students tell a pregnant teacher that he wanted to punch her in the stomach. Another student said, "You can't do that, she's pregnant." The first student then said, "That's the point. These are 5th graders. This is also in a school that rarely has behavior problems, so this was quite a shock." Something similar happened to me when I was pregnant with my first. A student told me he was going to make me lose a baby. It's the only time I've really ever flipped out on a student in my 7 years of teaching. That student had some serious issues, though, and by the end of the school year I was the only teacher he would talk to about the that went on his life, bouncing from foster home, abuse, etc. He left a letter on my desk at the end of the year saying that my unborn child was incredibly lucky to have me as a mom. I ugly cried at my desk when I read it. When I was in high school, we had this one little frickwit kid who acted like he was God Emperor, coolest kid in the world. Everyone liked him act. When in reality he was the kid that everyone would say things like, "Yeah, I hope that kid freaking straight up just dies. Nothing of value will be lost on a regular basis." Kid was a freaking absolute disturber. Fights, stealing, drugs, drinking at school, you name it, he did it. One day near the end of the year, the grade 11 math teacher, who was pregnant about 6 months, had failed him on a test. He confronted her after class. He was screaming in the hall outside at her, and as she started to walk down the stairs to go to the office, he ran up and shoved her down the staircase, a good 50-60 steps. Baby was apparently fine after a checkup. Cops were called. He tried to bite a cop and got pepper sprayed and freaking slammed down real hard. They had literally tied him up, 3-point style, ankles wrapped up, wrists wrapped up, and a big velcro thing around the torso and arms to keep him from moving. He was screaming it like, "You'll kill your family, blah blah blah, rape your kids, yada yada." Last I heard, about 2-3 years ago, he got into a fight at a bar in my town and murdered 2 people and is currently in prison still. Nice to hear a happy ending to your story, smiley face. Good grief, this makes me sad. When my wife was pregnant, her students were extremely protective of her. A fight happened in the hall, and they formed a protective cordon around her. From then on, they advised her to not go out in the hall, just call for help if something happened. I work in a max security, male prison. When I was pregnant with my first, I had my own block, and the inmates that lived there turned into little grandmas with me, incredibly protective. Tried leaving me snacks, drinks, would save me chow from their line, would tell me all sorts of old wives' tales, etc. I was due around Easter, and I was their special novena prayer subject for the Catholic inmates. When I was pregnant with my second, I had a job in our main yard. If another inmate from another block was talking to me, an inmate from my old block would step to him, making sure I was okay and not being inconvenienced. Back when I was a teacher, one of my students randomly started punching another kid, his friend, in the middle of class. No provocation whatsoever. The puncher was into bodybuilding and pretty in shape, and he had never been violent before in school, so this was both surprising and hard to break up considering his size. He broke his friend's nose and was smiling after. Had no idea what he did was weird or upsetting. I had a friend who would randomly get violent and wouldn't stop until someone else hit him back. I was in fights with him often and was basically his only friend, because nobody else tolerated his behavior. He was a really nice guy when he wasn't acting up and we hung out a lot. One time he got me by surprise though and chocked me against a wall and I genuinely thought I might die until another friend and some adults could pull him off of me. I was afraid of him and wary for a while after that, but it was also the last time he got violent like that. We were friends 4 years after until he randomly blocked my number and social media out of the blue. Saved you from himself. But it was also the last time he got violent like that. This though, it feels a bit odd to suddenly decide that after years of not having issues with OP. Just because he had no more issues with OP doesn't mean he didn't have issues elsewhere. Could have had a major violent incident with someone else and decided it wasn't worth the risk of it happening with OP again. Probably, yeah. One of my students, high school, came in one day and handed me a pop vinyl figurine from one of her favorite bands. She said I could have it and I, not used to random gifts, asked her why she was giving it to me. She said something along the lines of she didn't need it anymore. I thanked her and told her to have a good day. The following day she killed herself. It immediately became clear why she didn't need the figurine anymore. That still bothers me. Do you still have the figurine? Pool girl sad face. I do. I will keep it forever. I really hope that you're not being too hard on yourself. Hey, so obviously this pool girl had a pretty awful time of it, but I've been pretty close to them myself. You should know that that gift probably meant an awful lot to her, and that you, as a teacher, were likely very important to her as well. Despite all the hell that her life may have been, you made it at least a little bit better for her, and she knew that, and she really cared. Though the worst wasn't avoided, you did make a difference, and she noticed. You did a lot for her. Thanks for saying that. I used to teach a PE class to 3 5-year-olds. I had this one kid who used to come with his friend from kinda. His friend's mother apologized to me numerous times and said she never would have offered to bring him if she knew what he was like. More than once I had to evacuate the rest of the kids from the gym because this 3-year-old would be running around the gym screaming fuck and coolant at the top of his lungs while trying to punch, kick or headbutt other kids. You never knew what would set him off. If you asked him to kick a ball he was equally likely to kick another student or the ball. One time he went so violent that I couldn't get him away from the other kids and ended up wrapping him up in the firm cuddle technique which they definitely don't teach teachers about anymore. I basically dropped him to his knees with me on my knees behind him, arms wrapped around his arms and his chest. The only part he could move was his head and he kept trying to smash the back of his head into my face. But the worst part was the laughter. He normally had a vague, empty look on his face, but when he was trying to hurt someone he would scream with laughter wearing the biggest eating grin. I only had him for 10 sessions once a week, but holy frick I will never forget that kid. I had a 3-year-old with the same thing. Would have to hold him while he was evil laughing and trying to headbutt me. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for a whole school year. What is the cause of this type of behavior? In my experience, extreme oppositional defiant disorder. You say black, they say white. You say sit, they say stand. You say follow these basic rules of conduct, they say rots in hell. My wife worked at a camp for people with special needs, everything from like age 470. While one older lady had schizophrenia and was somewhat aggressive, though not all people with schizophrenia are aggressive, among many other issues, which their caretakers did not tell anyone. The camp wasn't designed for people with this kind of illness. The worst one I ever saw her deal with was a child with OD. She eventually had to do the same thing, grabbing the kid from behind and sitting down behind him. He bit her, spit on her and wouldn't stop screaming. It was really bad. Yep, I've seen this type of behavior when I was volunteering at an early Head Start program working with 3, 4, 5-year-olds. One kid would have little episodes where he'd start throwing chairs across the room, spitting on the teachers, getting violent. It was pretty bad and you never knew what would set him off. I taught 3rd graders for a year, so the kids were around 9 years old. It was a couple of days before summer holidays and I asked the kids what they were going to do during summer. I got to this one girl and asked her what she was going to do and she happily announced she was going to Germany with her sister and parents. I asked her what she was going to do in Germany and she said she was going to ask people if they have €1. I was like what, and she proceeded to sit down on the floor with a really sad look on her face, stuck her hand out to me and said, "See, like this. Please miss, do you have just €1? I'm hungry." She didn't really see anything wrong with this. I'm pretty sure she didn't really understand what she was doing. I was quite alarmed by this, so I informed the other school staff. It turned out that even though they weren't actually poor, her parents were regularly taking their 2 daughters to Germany over summer where they would make them beg for money in the streets. I heard the girl and her sister got pulled out of school shortly after that, but I don't know what happened after since I don't work there anymore. I'm gonna guess you're from somewhere in Europe? Balkans. Yep. Fellow Balkanian here, and in the summer months, this is a little too common. Mothers and aunts make their daughters dance or beg for money. It's truly sad just watching. Possibly the strangest reply here. This is sadly very common in Europe. I live in Norway, where children cannot beg on the streets as they will immediately be taken in by police, social services. So no children begging, but we get hordes of adult beggars every summer, as well as a stable presence year-round. Weird, as it sounds, this is basically seasonal work for many Romani people. As noted, it is mostly people of Romani origin coming. I realize I could write an entire novel on this, as I find the culture very interesting. Traditionally they would travel around and sell goods and do different odd jobs. Stricter registration and working policies makes that more difficult now than, say, the 1930s. Begging in the streets is probably an easier way to make money these days. Sadly, Romani girls makes up most of the street walking prostitutes here at this time. Earlier it was mostly women trafficked from Africa. It is a very sad situation all around, and I don't think any country has found a helpful way to provide services and resources to the Romani people. It's probably a combination of governments not taking their culture fully into account and the Romani themselves not willing to change any aspect of their culture to fit into modern society.